and then I'll get us started. Streaming this to YouTube this time, by the way.
Yes.
Not.
We are live.
Oh, we are
You see
doing
it?
live. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
We are.
Yep, I see it too.
Live right now.
Okay, we are live right now. Okay, all right. In 3, 2. Welcome inside another edition of the SVG podcast. This time we're doing it live in anticipation of Sunday's Super Bowl 55. If you're watching us live, welcome in. If not, we'll certainly try to get a little bit of a crowd in here right now as we get rolling. But first, we want to welcome in the entire SVG editorial team to talk about everything going on this weekend, especially this Sunday at Super Bowl 55. The Buccaneers and the Chiefs on CBS Sports. Of course, we're joined by our co-executive director of editorial services, Ken Kirschbaumer, our chief editor, Jason Dackman, our associate editor, Christian Hernandez, and I'm director of digital, Brandon Costa. Gentlemen, the NFL made it here. We got a Super Bowl on Sunday. How are you all doing? Ken, how you holding up? This is like, other than the year that Jason and I were at the Super Bowl in Minneapolis because it was too cold for your blood, apparently. This is the first time you're not at the Super Bowl in a really long time. This is a common for a lot of people who work in this industry who are used to just going to the Super Bowl every year. It's kind of a spoil that they've taken for granted forever. Has it been weird not running around a host city all Super Bowl week?
I mean, the whole year's been weird, clearly, but yeah, absolutely. It is always fun, bouncing from ESPN to the NFL Network to the international compound to the domestic compound, and kind of seeing everybody checking in. Very different energy down there. I'm looking forward to having a nice big Super Bowl party here with Carrie and myself, and nothing, no one coming over. So, but it should be good to watch it on TV. But I do miss seeing everybody down there. Patty Power, I talked to her on Thursday. She's like, "Do you miss being here?" I'm like, "Absolutely." It's always fun hanging out with them and watching how that it all comes together. So, how are you guys all doing? Ready for the game?
Yeah, I mean, I wish I didn't hate both teams so much, but I think a lot of the country is in that area, and hopefully that'll make more people watch. Excited to eat too much food by myself and have my daughter watch her first Super Bowl and, have a few cervezas. That's pretty much what the Super Bowl is about, because the commercials are going to suck. Let's be honest. Commercials are not going to be good this year. So,
well, they haven't been good for 15 years.
Yeah, but it's even worse this year. I mean, everybody just bailed. They're just like, they were too scared to make a statement. It's just too touchy. So basically, it's really just about the food this year, I guess. That's really the only thing. What about you, Christian?
How about you, man?
It's a Super Bowl that doesn't feel like the Super Bowl. We've said it enough. It was like the NBA Finals. It didn't feel like the NBA Finals, and the World Series. It didn't feel like the World Series. Add your major high-profile event here that doesn't feel like it. But you know what? We're here to talk about some tech. So enough about the food, it's always about the food, Jason, not just this year. But let's go talk about some cool things that are happening in Tampa.
All right. Yeah, you got it, man. We're going to talk about a lot of things, more than just the game. We'll start with the game, but we'll certainly check in on what NFL media is up to. Jason had the chance to talk to the folks over there who I'm sure are probably already even got their eye on next year's Super Bowl. We'll get into that. Christian had the opportunity to talk with both the digital content creation teams at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Kansas City Chiefs. The team angle is always fun and exciting to talk about. And Christian talked to Christy Badon from the Chiefs and from the Buccaneers, and Glenn Connolly from the Chiefs. So he'll give you what those teams are up to under some pretty strict restrictions that they need to be under. We'll talk about the in-stadium production. And later on the program, we'll actually be joined by a special guest. We'll be joined by Paul Hemming. He's a longtime veteran sports television director, and he'll just kind of give us the lowdown of, as someone who's worked in the industry as long as he has, what does he look for when he watches a game like the Super Bowl? So it'll be interesting to get his perspective on how he enjoys a game like the big game, being so ingrained in the sports television industry. But Ken, let's start with the game production, because that's where everyone's eyes will be this weekend on Sunday evening, beginning at 6:30 p.m. Eastern, approximately. Take us inside some of the high-level numbers of what CBS is looking at. Always big numbers. It's always audacious and over the top, but that's what the Super Bowl is all about, right? So give us a little quick rundown of what we can expect to see from a cool, fun tech toys perspective on Sunday.
Yeah, so this is the by the numbers. So they have 120 plus cameras. I believe talking to Jason Cohen from CBS on Friday, he said 122, although that can kind of flex up and down a little bit. So I think it's going to stick to at least 122. 18 robotic cameras, 34 of those cameras are embedded into the pylons, as we know. So that kind of does bump the number up a lot. 31 cameras with super slow-mo capabilities, 10 cameras with 4K for Zoom. There is no 4K HDR broadcast this year. 8 cameras fixed to the goalpost, 2 cameras with 8K capabilities. Those are Sony cameras with Canon 8K lenses that'll be shooting down the sidelines. Again, giving them a chance to go up to 800%. Think about it, as far as for those kind of close plays, which would be great. 6 fixed cameras on the back goalpost, 2 Venice steady cams, which of course have been all the rage this year. I believe there may also be a Sony Alpha 1, the only camera I think that's in the US ever, or maybe in the world, the 8K, that Sony Alpha camera. They have it.
Wait, they have that A1. They've got that already.
Yeah, it's going to be used in.
Wow,
Yeah.
that only just got announced like a week or 2 ago.
Oh yeah, no, they got it, and
That's awesome.
Yeah, Jason said that their camera guy loves it because when he touches the screen, he said the zoom is or the focus is like instantaneous. So which is obviously huge for that whole camera system. So they got those steady cams, 2 sky cams, a fly cam, the Jib Tech trolley cam, which is probably the biggest news this year, and then 1 movie bird crane, which is 52 feet. That'll kind of give some really great dramatic shots to their studio and even let them get some shots outside of the stadium. And then a plane with a fixed camera mounted. You know, the weather right now is a little bit, we'll see. I think it should be okay, but hopefully the plane will be up there. There are 20 mobile units in the compound, which is much bigger because of just social distancing. So we have NEP, CBS at the center of that. Game Creek's involved as well. Game Creek Encore is there for all the pregame and studio stuff. And then FNF has a number of units also on site. So overall, 350 plus record output channels with 37 record playback devices. 4 Hawkeyes are obviously working remotely, which has been a theme all year long for CBS. They will have some operations up at the broadcast center in New York, and Nickelodeon, as we know, is involved, and they're going to kind of be working out of all mobile video to create some Nickified highlights during halftime. So it should be cool. Should be a great show.
Cool. Yeah, what's it been like for, Patty Power and Jason Cohen, who are 2 of the big names that are running the operations down there? Because we heard Sean McManus mentioned on the one of the press calls earlier this week that on-site staffing's probably down about 15% compared to previous Super Bowls that they've done, and the last time CBS did a Super Bowl was the Mercedes-Benz Stadium Super Bowl. That was 52, 3?
Atlanta 2 years ago.
Atlanta, right. But at the same point, there's probably not quite double, but almost double the amount of mobile units. And that's, as you mentioned, because you need to spread people out. From Jason and Patty's perspective, what have been the challenges for them as far as managing personnel? Because the thing that is so unique about this, and we wonder if it's even going to stick around, is, even in the years when we were talking about remote production and the things that could change in the sports television industry, there was always that caveat that we threw at the end of it, which was, well, you never do the Super Bowl this way, but ... And now here we are doing the Super Bowl this way. What has been their kind of perspective of how that's all gone down, and do they feel that it's gone well?
Yeah, no, I think it's going well. I mean, look, the lesson, I think, for everybody in the whole entire world, whether you're in sports production or not, even for us, is, if you have a process that's working in this situation, for months, you don't change it just because it's the Super Bowl. So,
right.
Patty and even Sean have both said, this process began with the PGA, right? When those workflows that they started for the PGA have kind of transitioned all year long. Those four Hawkeyes have really been a theme for CBS on almost every event that they've done, which is people working from home. Just kind of gives them a chance to have some extra replay without having people on site. And talking with those operators, they enjoy actually working at home, which is kind of interesting. So I think thematically, it's just sort of, if it works in this COVID situation where you have to kind of minimize people, just do not change things too much. So they're totally, it is challenging because you do have different entities coming in, right, with NEP and Game Creek and FNF, and so it becomes a little more complex as far as just kind of connecting everything up when you just have to deal with social distancing and such. but they're very happy right now. They felt pretty relaxed when I talked to them. So the fact that they could talk to me for a half hour, 45 minutes is always a good sign.
Yeah.
Yeah. But look, I think when you talk to them in general, the big story also is just embracing what we hope is only a one-time thing, which is an empty stadium, relatively empty stadium. So with the trolley cam, for example, which is going to fly about 6 to 8 rows back off the lower level. And if you saw the AFC Championship game, you saw it in action a couple times. That camera is going to move 65 miles per hour up and down the sideline. So they're hoping that Tyreek Hill has a chance to kind of break free. I guess Mike Evans doesn't quite have that speed, right? From what I understand, right? Or Chris Godwin, but so hopefully Tyreek Hill has a nice chance.
Tell them that. They would say that they do. They say they run a 4.40. I guarantee you.
That's true. So yeah, hopefully we'll get to see that camera zipping up and down the sideline. The challenge becomes, can they use that with people in the stands? And anecdotally, they kind of said, they think that if it proves it, they've used sky cams before, right, with people in stands. So there is a potential if the trolley cam gets proven out that it could stick around. The only issue is that it's, if it was 8 rows back, it's going to fly in front of people's faces. But I think we've all been at events where, it's kind of funny. When the sky cam starts flying around the crowd, you can't hide it. Like US Open tennis, you think it'll be in your face all the time, and you're like, where is it? And you have to, kind of try to track it down. So it may actually be able to stick around with a little bit of luck. So that's the big innovation. Oh, Brandon, you're muted.
Yeah, and we saw it used a little bit in baseball too. And I remember when we were talking to the guys at Root Sports up in Seattle, they were using it on a Mariners games. And that was one of my first questions to them was like, can you do this when fans are back? And they said they think they could. I think about it. If you're really worried about those front row seats, I feel like those front row seats also get blocked by the cart cam. There's stuff going by constantly when you're down that low. Are there safety concerns? Sure. Yeah. You don't want the camera, falling out of the sky onto people in the stands, but they get pretty aggressive with the spider cam too on things like Monday Night Football you're going to see it in this game where they're going to bring that aerial camera like right up to the booth with Jim and Tony. And then they're going to come back out onto the field. So they're not afraid to fly over, and they would do that whether the stands were empty or they were full. So I think that brings a pretty unique angle. It's funny. It's kind of comparable for me to the whole conversation that's sprung out as a result of these shallow depth of field cameras that's caused so much drama on social media and everything about people being like, these cameras aren't new. It's not a big deal. Yeah, it's true, but it's just a different deployment of that technology that we hadn't seen before. Same thing with this kind of dactyl cam. Is it far more advanced? Yes, but it's not, it's just a 2-point aerial system. It's what Skycam used to be back in the day. And now Skycam's gotten so much better. And now you can just throw another one off to the side and just kind of like do the side angle. And I think just when you see something from a new angle for the first time, it catches your eye. And then you'll get used to it. And then it'll just become a part of the camera arsenal like everything else does. Right. And you kind of even forget where it's coming from. But it's pretty interesting that those kinds of innovations are still being done despite some of the limitations that are in place for CBS in these circumstances right now. So I feel like other than the crowd, which they are apparently still doing some supplemental crowd noise for this game, despite the fact that there will be about 20 to 25,000 people in the stands. Right. I wonder how different it's really going to look and feel at the end of the day when we go to watch this thing. The toys and the whiz bang is probably still going to be there, and probably still going to be very Super Bowl-esque, especially when you bake in things like the augmented reality graphics.
Right. Yeah. I think it's going to, look, I think the show, once the game starts, it looks really good. I think it's going to feel very much like a Super Bowl. It's weird because I find myself when I watch these games with empty stadiums, when there's fans in the stadiums, my first thought, my brain goes into like, oh, that's too many people or whatever. Like it kind of gets in the wrong place emotionally. But I think that, once kickoff starts, it's going to be a great game. I think the two teams it's going to be a good matchup. Hopefully it's not raining. A little bit of mud always helps. But yeah, so I think it's going to be really great. I think they're ready to go. And then the Nickelodeon thing, again, kind of shows this whole multi-platform future that's definitely going to be happening, which is using augmented reality systems to be able to, kind of integrate new augmented reality graphics. And I can envision, within 5 years, maybe you can have a customized augmented reality look, right? You can say, you know what, I'm a Chiefs fan. I don't want to see any kind of celebratory augmented graphics when the Buccaneers score. I want to have negative graphics that, so I don't know. But that's, you can have all kinds of fun potentially.
I can't wait for
Yeah,
the
for sure.
fuck the Chiefs graphics that you're
Right,
going to get when they'll be like, it'll get hacked, and that's going to be tremendous. I can't wait.
So on the game, we got your producer is Jim Rickoff. It's his second Super Bowl. Dale Arnold is the director. It's his
Mike Arnold.
sixth. His sixth. So a lot of experience still behind the scenes here. But Ken, anything else on the game that you want to touch on before we mosey along?
No, let's mosey along. That's great. Thanks. Everybody.
Okay. Yeah, no, a really, really great job as always on that. Obviously, CBS has the game, but other broadcasters are still heavily involved. ESPN has some on-site presence. NFL Media certainly does too. Jason, you got the chance to talk to the folks from NFL Media who usually go all out for Super Bowl week, obviously. Very different. They tend to do some of their biggest work on things like opening night, which is usually Monday night of Super Bowl week. NFL Honors, which is usually Saturday night of Super Bowl week. Those things still happening in some kind of capacity, but they're very, very different. When you talk to Dave Shaw at NFL Media, just how different is this Super Bowl week for previous ones that they've done?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, very happy to have the podcast back, and welcome back, Brandon, who is out on paternity. So congratulations, a brand new daughter for Brandon Costa. Very exciting. Look, NFL Media has been adapting the same way that they have going back to the draft. It's weird. It seems like a lifetime ago, but when the draft happened and they said, okay, everything's virtual, let's embrace it. That's pretty much what they did. If anybody watched opening night, they saw essentially 1 million different feeds coming in at once, and their Culver City headquarters managed all those feeds. It'll be very similar in terms of the red carpet show for Honors Night this weekend. And then in terms of their on-site presence, not surprisingly, very different than in past years. If it's a draft or a Super Bowl, NFL Media tends to go all out. This year, they do have a set on site that's at Tampa General Hospital. Not a shout out, actually, to the healthcare workers, not against the healthcare workers, but it's just a beautiful shot. It's really, if anybody's watched NFL Media for Super Bowl Live, it just overlooks the water, and it's just really gorgeous. So they're there. They have a couple other stand-up spots here and there, but for the most part, they are using the trucks on site, which is Game Creek Glory, and a couple others as pass-through systems that go back to Culver City. And then they got a bunch of control rooms back there where they're running all their shows out of. Good Morning Football is in New York as well. If anybody's been checking that out, they're at their studio in New York, as they have been when it's safe enough to do so. And they still believe that they have, the most comprehensive coverage, while it's not necessarily as on site and all access as it has been. Again, they're embracing that Zoom culture, and they have all year. They increased all of their decoding at their Culver City facility to make sure that they could get more feeds in, more on-air talent from home, more Zooms from players. And if you've just watched anything this week, you've seen that they have really gotten a lot done with very limited presence on site. They are looking at a significantly reduced crew, about 583 in Miami, 217 this week in Tampa. So, you see where it goes. Obviously, trucks are down as well, but a very large presence. And, I also talked to NFL Films, who we all know from Hard Knocks and Steve Sable and Iconic Shots. But as Ken knows, and we all know, they also handle the world feed and build the international broadcast compound every year, which is essentially half the compound. CBS gets half, or, the host broadcaster gets half and the international broadcaster does. They have a similar thing where they have a lot less international broadcasters on site, but somehow the coverage is about the same. They're embracing live view and TVU, IP-based transmission rather than rolling in a full truck. They actually have more trucks for the world feed, and that's just due to social distancing and such. Even though the number of broadcasters is down that are on site, the compound is actually about 25% larger this year, just to account for social distancing. I think that's probably true at CBS, Ken, as well, and at most compounds for that matter this year. But again, really just saying, okay, just because we can't have 1 million people on site because we want to keep everybody safe, let's not abandon the idea that this is the Super Bowl, that this is the biggest event in the US, one of the largest events in the world. Let's use at home, let's use next gen tech. Let's make sure that we can figure out ways to make this feel like a big day, even though we don't have 1 million people on site. So I think NFL Films and NFL Media feel really good going into it. On the NFL Film side, one other thing I wanted to mention real quick, they obviously can't have as many camera ops on the field for, all of their cinematic capture and stuff. But that said, they've repositioned people and figured out new ways. They've gathered more media this playoff season than they ever have in any playoffs before, despite having less cameras out there. So it's really interesting the way that everybody is just saying, let's go for it. Let's absolutely go for it, regardless of what this situation is. And I can't wait to see. I always look forward to that post Super Bowl NFL Films documentary they do. It's always one of my favorite things. So that should be fun. And again, NFL Media has been doing a great job all week, along with ESPN, just kind of being all over the Super Bowl leading up to the big game.
I guess,
Sure.
one of the things that they have, I'm sure, Jason, as a channel, because I asked ESPN, I said, so what's going on with your, with guests, right? This week is all about every movie star TV show being promoted and they're like, there's no guests.
Well, I mean, there's no in-person guests, but if you look at what Super Bowl Live has been doing, they have a guest every hour, what I mean? And even more, they have a lot of guests, but it's Zoom. It's definitely not, sitting on the set with them. It's not, there's no car wash as they used to have, right? Where you just run everybody through. But they're doing their best to really have that fun element in there anyway.
Yeah.
How much was sorry, go ahead, Ken.
ESPN also, they I don't know if NFL had the same thing, but they put their set in a place where people can't get to it because they didn't want to have people just wandering up. So they're like, let's make this as hard to get to as possible and not encourage anybody to stop by because they just will gravitate. And there's you can't come here. So
it's the anti-game day, or actually current game day if you had.
right.
Super Bowl at Fort Knox. That's what it's called.
Yeah, lock and key. Jason, how much was Dave willing to admit that he's already looking ahead to next year's Super Bowl, which will be Super Bowl 56, LA, SoFi Stadium, NFL Network's new offices right there. So the whole concept of who's on site and who's not will be totally meaningless. It's going to be a big one. I feel like a lot of people this year who are maybe looking at some things like the sad pictures of Radio Row and people not being able to go to the game and going, man, next year we're going to go buck wild. How much is he looking forward to SoFi already?
Dave, he's a professional and he's not looking a day past the Super Bowl, but of course he is extremely pumped for next year. Let's be honest, all roads lead to next year's Super Bowl. The way that first Super Bowl at Cowboys at the time, Cowboy Stadium was, SoFi is such a leap ahead and it's in such a major market. And like you said, NFL Media will be opening a facility or is scheduled to open their new media facility right there before the Super Bowl next year. So it really is kind of like you said, Brandon, it's like it's the biggest of the biggest. It doesn't get any bigger. And ideally, vaccinations will come through, the society will somewhat return to where we're at. And that's when the Roaring 20s start. I'm telling the new Roaring 20s are starting on Super Bowl Sunday next year. That's what I've decided. That's where everybody just goes buck wild and we're just going to drink and party for 10 years. It'll be great.
Yeah. And then everything went great after that.
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah. And I feel like it's also like, obviously the pandemic has accelerated this, but when when you and I were in Miami last year, and this is no disrespect to Tampa, but that was even the mood then. When things were normal, it's like, we're going to do Tampa next year. And then we're going to get to SoFi for 56. And then you're really going to see what's going to go down. This was kind of always a stopgap year, kind of as much of as a Super Bowl can be. I mean, it's adorable to try to frame a Super Bowl that way. But that was kind of the conversation even before COVID kind of came along. All right, Jason, well, we're very excited for that. We're already starting the countdown, getting ready for next year. Christian, let's touch base with you real quick and talk a little bit about the teams that are involved in this game. Chiefs are back for the second straight year. Buccaneers back for the first time in a really long time, maybe the first time you could probably say in the digital media era. So they're staff is probably largely made up of, and we're joined by Paul on the podcast right now. Paul Hemming is our guest in a little bit. Paul, we'll get to you in just a little bit, but it's really great to see you. Christian, let's start with those Buccaneers, because you run into that every once in a while when a team makes it to a championship, whether it's the college football championship or the Final Four or a Super Bowl like this. And it's like, oh, the last time this team was here, like, social media didn't even exist.
Right.
So totally new ground for a lot of the people who work at the Buccaneers. You talk to Christy Badon, who's their VP of Digital and Media for the Buccaneers. What do they got planned, and how are they kind of taking this as something that's a totally new project for them?
Right. So this year's Bucs team was like the Chiefs team last year, because the Chiefs didn't make it to the Super Bowl in over 50 years. This is the first time the Bucs made it to the postseason in 13 years. I think their first Super Bowl in 18 years. And it just so happened to be the first Super Bowl with a home team playing in their actual home stadium. So coincidental as it is, they're not really have to worry about COVID challenges because they don't have to travel. They don't have to worry about staying in a hotel, being away from a facility. All their stuff is in Tampa. So all their staffers will be on site. And of course, they're, in terms of a content angle, again, first Super Bowl ever to have a home team playing it. So they're doing a lot of content, leveraging the backdrop of their home stadium. So Raymond James, they've hosted a Super Bowl back in 2009. I think 3 other Super Bowls. They did a final, no, not a Final Four. They did a championship for college football playoffs. So it's a venue outside of just the Bucs, but it's a venue that's known for hosting high profile events. On the other side, the Chiefs, not like it was last year. Last year, they were able to set up a portable server for the digital content in the hotel, be there in Miami all week long. They had 8 videographers and 8 photographers, total free reign of the stadium. This year, they have 8 people in total, both on field and in the stadium. They actually were stuck in KC until yesterday, and they had to shift. They had to do kind of in shifts. So one pair of people went on a flight yesterday, and then another pair of people will be flying down tomorrow. So they've been kind of stuck in KC doing content from their facility on Zoom with everything going on with protocols. And they also are having a lot of staffers back in Arrowhead that can't travel, Glenn included. They'll be working and editing things in the facility while those people are shipping it over the air to Arrowhead. So it's interesting, but this is Glenn's actually 3rd Super Bowl in a row. He was with the Rams when they played against the Patriots. So he's a kind of a good luck charm. This is his 3rd year in a row working in a Super Bowl. So props to him and props to Christy. They're getting it done and connecting fans while they can, even though a lot of things are in their way.
So I feel less bad for Glenn now. I was going to say, like, you feel for these people who, like, their team makes the Super Bowl, and Super Bowl week, as we've said, it's a lot of work, but it's potentially a once in a lifetime opportunity for you as someone who works at a team or a network or whatever it may be. And to have it be like this does feel a little like but if he's been there twice already, he'll get over it. He'll be
right. I was talking to him. He was like, no. I was there a year before that with the Rams. I was like, he
probably likes sleeping in his own bed, to be honest.
Exactly. Right.
That good of a luck charm. I hope they put the franchise tag on him next year, because he seems like a very prized free agent. I would think
everyone's going to be going for him. Exactly. Real quickly before we wrap up, Christian, you also talked to the team at Van Wagner for the in-stadium show. Always a big deal. I mean, look, there's going to be a lot fewer fans in the stadium, obviously, but the stadium's not going to be empty.
Right.
So is programming still going to feel pretty similar to previous big game events that they've done like this?
Yeah, I talked to their EVP of productions, Bob Becker, huge supporter of SVG. And I said to him, I said, Bob, don't lie to me. Is it weird doing a neutral game where the home team is there? He goes, listen, we're pros, cut and dry. So whatever the Chiefs get, the Bucs will get. And they won't have fans like in the first couple of rows, first 10 rows of the lower bowl, which was customary in all stadiums this year. And they're actually putting 26 LED physical screens around the lower bowl, 360 degree. So they have extra in-venue prompts that they can use to shout out the healthcare workers that are there in the stands, or just sponsorship that they're willing to do, because that's always hard this year without a lot of people in the stands. But due to social distancing, they will have not 1, not 2. They will have 3 different control rooms inside of Raymond James. And they will also have remote staffers across the country, basically everywhere in the country, besides, I think, Washington. So Pacific Northwest is one of the locations where they won't be, but they'll be using BBAC technology Bebop technology to get everyone acclimated to the server in Tampa. Similar to what Jason mentioned, NFL Media kind of did with the virtual draft back in April. So it is weird. It is different, but they're going to make the most of it. It's kind of what you're going to see like they did in the NHL bubble. It was a product for the fans at home because it's a television spectacle, but for the people that are there, they're going to get a good heavy treatment of stuff that they're used to seeing when they go to a game.
Sure. Well, great job, Christian, on that. For everything that we've talked about here on the podcast so far, be that the in-stadium show, what the Bucks and the Chiefs are doing, the NFL Media, CBS Sports, ESPN, we've covered it all. If you'd rather not hear our voices and read it in text form, there's fantastic profiles right now over on the site. And if you don't subscribe to our newsletter, certainly do that by going to sportsvideo.org, and it'll all be there. And you can follow us on our social channels, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, everywhere. Ken, I know you have to run off and head to the doctor. Are you leaving us now?
I'm leaving now, but thanks guys for doing this. Paul, great to see you. Sorry, I'll watch it on demand, Paul. I'll check you out later.
It was nice to meet you, Ken.
Everybody have a great weekend. Enjoy the game, and great job everybody on the reporting. So really proud of you guys, and see you all soon.
Ken, what are you most excited for? I want to ask that because Brandon, what are you most excited for the Super Bowl before you leave?
Well, you know, I do have Chiefs family friends, and so I got to root for the Chiefs. But I am excited to see actually two good offenses, and I'm hoping to be able to see the difference between the Alpha camera and the Venice camera. I'm curious if we'll see the difference there.
Good call. Nice SVG answer. I like
there
that.
You go. Right.
There you go.
Approach.
I think these LED boards, it's kind of cool. You know, it's cool to see that they aren't just saying, you know what, let's just strip stuff back and save money. They're saying, you know, let's lean into this and create some new experiences. So, and the halftime show. Who can't look for the halftime show?
Do you know who's performing, Ken?
It's yeah, dude.
Oh boy, here we go. Oh boy.
Don't say the weekday.
Boy.
It's the weekend it's the weekend with no E.
Start singing the song. Sorry. See, there you go. Thanks, Christian.
You're welcome.
Oh, the kid puts the old man on the spot. Way to go.
I'm not looking forward to the halftime show. No, I am. All right, guys. Catch you later.
All right, Ken, thank you so much. All right, we're going to move on to our second portion of our conversation. You heard a little bit of a glimpse of his voice there. We're joined on the program by Paul Hemming. Paul is a live sports TV director for more than 2 decades now. He's directed some big time events. He's directed multiple Grey Cups, which for you uncultured Americans down here, that's the football championship for the CFL up in Canada. Done many World Junior Hockey Championships, which if you're hockey fans like some of us here on the podcast is always one of the highlights of the year. Winter Olympics you've done. I believe you were the director on Sidney Crosby's golden goal in the Vancouver Olympics, which we will not talk about anymore.
Sorry about that. Apologies.
And he currently directs Carolina Hurricanes games for Fox Sports Carolinas, soon to be Bally Sports Carolinas, perhaps, but that's the conversation for another day. Paul is also one of the voices of the podcast Inside the Truck, which he hosts with his veteran producer friend and colleague Steve Lansky. If you do not listen to that show right now and you listen to this show, pretty good chance you're going to like that one. So go check that one out. Paul, thanks so much for joining us today. It's great to talk to you. How are you, sir?
I'm excellent. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to this chat today. I was excited when I got the invite. I'm a big fan of SVG. I follow you guys on all social platforms and read everything that you put out there. So I'm kind of fanboying a little bit right now, but it's great to be with you guys. And we just our Inside the Truck, our last episode was based entirely on Super Bowl production elements with my partner Steve Lansky. So a lot of it's still fresh in my mind. So I'm happy to join you guys today.
Great. Yeah, we're thrilled to have you too. And we're excited to talk to you about what you as a director, someone who's been directing live sports for some time, we like to talk about how former athletes like to watch the game and what do they see that the average person doesn't see. For someone like you, when you're watching an event as big as the Super Bowl, what are you looking for and what captures your attention? Are you able to watch it for fun as a fan, or are you constantly calling camera numbers in your head the whole time?
I will say that being a sports TV director, and I'm sure this goes for any director of film as well too, I can't watch as a fan. Even if my beloved Detroit Lions were playing in the big game this Sunday, I would not be able to watch it as a fan. I completely 100% watch from a production standpoint with my director hat on. and basically trying to call the next camera shot in my mind before we get there. So it's difficult. It drives everybody that I'm watching the game with nuts. They're like, can't you just sit back and enjoy your beverage and have some chili nachos and just watch? I'm like, I can't do it. I'm like, when are they going to get trolley cam in? It's been 5 snaps. We haven't seen trolley cam yet. So yeah, that'll be my viewing experience on Sunday.
You're preaching to the choir here, by the way, Paul. All of our spouses can't watch sports with us because we're just like, oh my God, there's the new camera. There's the new camera. And they're like, we don't care. We do not care.
Oh, God forbid if there's a new score bug, like I just won't shut up about it.
Oh, I know. It's like, can you believe they did that? Like they didn't even leave enough space for that. Like it's micro dissecting it, I mean, I'm so bad. I go to a movie with somebody and I'm like, did you know that clock said 1:15 in the last shot? And now it says like 1:45.
Continuity.
Yes, exactly. It's all about attention to detail and it's destroying my life. But anyway, I guess it's why it's allowed me to direct some of the shows that I've directed.
You're not in this business if you don't have a little OCD, right, Paul?
Yeah, exactly.
Paul, wanted to ask you, and first of all, luckily, you'll never probably have to worry about having to watch the Lions in the Super Bowl, so you don't have to. So I am curious, though, like coaches and players always do the thing where it's like, we saw it all week this week in the media coverage. It's just a game, Super Bowl, championship, whatever it might be. It's just a game. If you're talking about Olympics, I'm sure right before Sidney Crosby was just going to go, hey, just another game. But is it for you guys, when you have directed some of your largest events, the highest profile events you've done, do you go in more amped up, more nervous, or do you really try to take that mindset of just like, hey, I know how to do this and I'm going to do it just like I always do?
I would say that there's 2 answers to that question. Number one is in your mind, you really do have to treat it like it's just another game, that it's, week 21 or whatever on your schedule. You can't, that can't be your foundation of your preparation work is that you have to really strip it right down and pretend like it's a week 1 game and you slowly build. But I mean, cards on the table, it's completely a beast like no other. And once you sit in that chair and the red light goes on, it's a completely different world. And at that point, you really just have to be controlled. You have to have a smart game plan. You have to follow, the broadcast philosophy of the show that day. And be aggressive though, because you have all these new technologies that you don't normally have. And believe me, you've got executives standing in the back row behind you going, you haven't seen trolley cam yet, or haven't seen any of the animated graphics yet, and that's going on, but you still have to shut all that out. And you still have to be able to cover the game you normally would, be aggressive, or smart aggressive, as I like to call it. And also the other factor too is, it's a championship game. And you have, it's an embarrassment of riches in terms of technology. It's easy to come out on right after the opening kickoff, on the first play from scrimmage, cut it like it's 2-minute warning of the fourth quarter of a tie game. You have to build to a crescendo, so you really have to pull back on the reins out of the gate and slowly let the horses out of the barn as you go along. And that's difficult. And it takes experience and it takes a lot of reps at a high level to be able to execute that.
So when you did like a Grey Cup, right? Did you look back on it and did you feel, hey, I knocked it out of the park? Or did you look back on it and only see the things that you wish you could have done better because so many people were watching?
The first Grey Cup I did, it felt like it went by in about half an hour. I mean, there was no whistles, no injuries, no timeouts in the first half, and it really felt like it took actually 30 minutes to play. So at that point, the analogy I use is when you're sitting in the director's chair, it's like driving down the Autobahn for the first time. Everything is just flying by you at like 1,000,000 miles an hour, and you have no idea if what you've done is good or bad. But as the game goes on, and not even the first game, I'm talking maybe that for me, I didn't really feel comfortable until I was like in my second championship game, where I started to slow down to a level where I could actually digest what was going on in the monitor wall in front of me and be able to make the correct choices. That first time that I did it, I felt like, drop a kid in the shallow into the pool for swimming lessons. It was just like, it was crazy. There was one sequence on setting a line of scrimmage shot where I had cameras basically 360 around the quarterback. And as he broke the huddle, I took one camera and he turned to look, receivers to his right. I cut that camera. He turned to look receiver. And I was just like, every shot I had was a great shot. I could have taken all of them. And it was a mistake to make that many cuts before snap. But for me, I was like, that's where I learned. That was my learning lesson. Just because you have it doesn't mean to say you have to use it. And it takes a while to be able to get in that groove. Dale Arnold will be in the chair on Sunday at Raymond James, and he'll be directing his 6th Super Bowl. I directed 6 Grey Cups. I'm not trying to compare the two in terms of scale and magnitude and technology, but I know where Dale would be at in his head in terms of covering the championship game. And yeah, it's there's a lot that goes on in that noggin, while from kickoff to final gun. That's for sure.
All right, Paul, before I ask the next question, as someone who is an avid hat collector of major league teams, I really appreciate your jersey collection in the background. That's beautiful. So your bona fides were mentioned, Grey Cups, Winter Olympics, Sidney Crosby's golden goal that still haunts me to this day. You're talking about building a crescendo, and you have all these tools at your disposal, and you're kind of picking and choosing you're in the pocket and you're trying to pick and choose when to get things involved. When you sit down and look at a tech list and see all that's at your disposal, how do you wrap your head around it and say, wow, I'm directing this game with 120 plus cameras. How do I get this one involved here? How do you kind of create that mindset before you sit in the chair? You have all this at your disposal. How do you use it?
That's a great question, Christian. What you have to do is you have to go right back down. You just have to take it right down to the hardwood. And the bottom line is the game is king. That's the philosophy I approach all my shows with. You cannot cheat the game. And if you cheat the game, you're cheating yourself and you're cheating the viewers. So basically, when you cover a football game, there's really just a standard complement of cameras that you cover the game with, right? The play-by-play cameras are all up top. They've got low end zone cameras. You got handhelds on both sidelines, some robos, on goalposts and stuff like that. You really start your mental cut or your visionary cut with those cameras, and you don't get outside of that. That's the key. Because the one thing you have to remember is on Sunday, there's going to be people watching the game that are watching their very first NFL game ever. And there's going to be NFL head coaches that are watching on their couch at home too. So the key is, how do you cut a show that is fair to both of those viewers, and it's difficult to find a sweet spot on that. But for me, like I position my cameras in the monitor wall the way that they are actually physically positioned in the stadium. So on the top row of my monitor wall, I'll have all my up cameras. On the bottom, in a bottom row, I'll have all my field level cameras. I'll have all my robotics, in areas left and right, near and far side as well too. But then when you're talking about a show like Super Bowl that has 120 plus cameras, it's impossible to digest that, in one glance when you have like less than 5 seconds to make a decision or less than a second to make a decision. The one thing that I did for Grey Cups that helped me was I actually color coded my monitors in the monitor wall. So all my up cameras, I colored green. All my field level cameras were red. All my robotic cameras were oranges, so that I know if there was a passing play that was to the left side of the field, out of bounds on the far side, I know that handheld over there is an orange cluster. So I would look right down to that orange cluster part of my wall, see that it was camera 17, take 17, as the receiver's being knocked out of bounds. So it just little things that you can do like that to help you make the right decision in a millisecond. That gives you the best chance for success.
Quick follow-up, Paul. When you're in the hotel before the game, I know a lot of athletes say that they can't get sleep because they're always thinking about what play or what they can do. A lot of visualization cues. Do you do that before a big game, and you kind of map out what you may do when you get in the chair the next morning or the next day?
Absolutely, Christian. That is a huge part of it. I mean, for me, it's all about visualization. It's about the stadium, right? I'll always take a stadium walk on game day to walk around and look. And I look for championship banners or retired numbers or, where this person might sit, or if there's a unique sign or a flag or something, because in a millisecond to be able to tell a cameraman, go get that, I need to do that. So it's not about a visual. I'll actually take a physical walk. It's even about the production mobile that you sit in. If it's a truck that you're used to working in, I know what the section is, the setup is in production. And so I'll envision that as well too. I'll envision myself like the way NFL teams script their first, 5, 7, 15 plays or whatever. I will script the first few cuts in my mind. How do we want to cover kickoff with cable cam? Do we want to cut low on the kickoff? How do I want to set the returner? That night before in my hotel room, you block everything out, put the do not disturb sign on, and you really are going through this in your mind. And that really helps when the red light goes on and you kick it off, because it's just like a pro athlete. In a hockey game, a player's not really truly in the game until he takes his first hit. or, you know, and a receiver's not really in the game until he catches that first pass and takes a hit, you know, and for me, I'm not really in the game until I start making some of those impactful cuts, and visualization is a huge part of that. So for sure. And the night before championship games, I always lock myself in my hotel room, put the DND sign on the door, and you know, put my headphones on, my noise canceling headphones, and you really have to start getting into a space at that point. You really do.
Yeah, Paul, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit here because I didn't ask you about this one beforehand, but I've got to get your take on this because I want to know your opinion on the 8K camera that's not 8K that Twitter can't seem to shut up about on NFL Sundays. Basically, 2 months ago, for those who have been living under a rock, Fox rolled out a Sony A7 IV, which is a mirrorless camera, which is used a lot in sports content creation, but very rarely, if ever, in a live game. Certainly one with like a full truck production the way it was. And it caught a lot of people's attention. People were saying it was 8K, 4K. It wasn't. It was the shallow depth of field that was giving that look that people viewers seem to really like, but people are in different camps as far as whether they think it actually looks good in a live broadcast or not. What's just having seen it as a viewer from your perspective, knowing how you do games, what do you think of how it looks and does it fit?
Excellent question, Brandon. And I take the old school approach on this, and so the old school camp or old timers or whatever you want to call it. I believe the images from it are phenomenal, and you know, for archival footage and for tease and opening and all that and stuff, it's great. But I really am a real stickler for if pictures don't match on the show. I believe just from a look continuity standpoint, everything has to look the same. And just to the layman, when they cut those cameras in live, it's obvious it's different right away. And the look is extremely different. And if you don't know anything about TV, then sure, you love it. But if you know stuff about TV, it's like it looks like it's out of focus to me. And I'm fighting to go to fight that depth of field. And I actually find myself looking at the depth of field and not actually the player that they're shooting. So for me, I love the technology. I love that it's incorporated. I just think that it belongs sort of in a post role. Teases, if there's any way they can shoot that stuff, you know, in the first quarter, get it back to the truck, roll it in a bumper format or something, or, you know, that I believe is a better application for it. I really feel it's too different, and that it comes out of left field when they cut it live. Just my opinion.
Yeah, and no, I totally get that and respect that. Yeah, I feel like it's definitely underappreciated in the whole conversation that's going online, just how difficult it is for that camera operator to keep the things in focus. Yes, that camera does phenomenal work creating this kind of content that you said, like stuff that gets pushed out on social. A lot of creatives that work at networks, teams, leagues, the LCCs that work for Major League Baseball or whatever, they're running around using those very types of cameras. You know, they're shooting for post. So how much of their card is usable? You're asking these camera operators to have to do this on the fly, live in real time. In some of the circumstances, they were using autofocus. And I mean, man, I give the camera operators a lot of credit for doing what they do, but boy, that challenge, you know, just saying, you know, it's so hard to do that live and in real time. I feel like you're almost putting the camera operator in a tough spot.
Oh, 100%. Their execution level is way higher than a regular game camera operators. Absolutely. I mean, you're running with players, you're trying to keep in focus. You've got other players that come into the frame and leave the frame. You know, if you're in the end zone, then you've got like the issue of like, you know, all the factors that come into it. The guys that run those cameras are phenomenally talented. That definitely needs to be mentioned for sure. But just in terms of the application, I believe it's more of a creative post look than it is a live camera look.
Gotcha. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. We talk a lot about the cameras and the visuals when we get excited for a big event like this. Oh, what cameras, what K is it going to be in? Where are they going to be positioned? They're going to be flying around. And we tend to overlook one of the most important parts of a television production, which is the audio. It's a bit of the redheaded stepchild in the sports broadcasting world, but we certainly try not to overlook that stuff. When you in your most recent episode of the podcast, Inside the Truck, you mentioned that you did a whole big breakdown on the Super Bowl, and you talked to someone who's working on the audio side. I'm wondering if you could kind of express, a lot of people who listen to this show are people who work in the industry. They get it. But what stands out to you in the work that needs to be done for a broadcast like this from an audio perspective that maybe doesn't get the glitz and glamour that some of the cameras and the lenses get as far as an event like this.
Well, it's true. The most important part of a broadcast, any broadcast, Super Bowl or not, is audio. Nothing can kill your show faster than something goes sideways with audio, whether that be a mic that was, hot potted when it shouldn't have been, or you lose a mic, right when Jim Nance is about to do his opening on camera, or, you get profanity or something. I mean, even more importantly is intercom, right? That all falls under the audio umbrella. And if a producer or director can't talk to talent, or that handicaps a show immediately. So audio definitely does not get the love that it deserves, and it is, I would say, that and the video operator, the video op department. Those are the two most important people on the show, because without them, you have no show. I would say, Brandon, at this point, in terms of concerns, they would be limited. Basically, you'd be kind of just making sure that you were locked and loaded on any changes that had occurred from weeks 1 to 20. The audio department, whether it be your A1s or your A2s or your A3s or utilities, all that, those are the A crew guys that have been doing the A show all year. So your confidence is high that any demands that production have will be executed. But for me, there would be three things that jump out. Number one would be that it's imperative to have a clear production plan laid out to the audio department as to where you're doing interviews, where you're doing on cameras. Are those cabled mics? Are they RF? What's the redundancy? What's the backup plan? To have that, to go over that A to Z and make sure that you've got that, locked down. That would be concern number one. Number two is protect the announcers. To make sure that their mics aren't being heard outside the truck anywhere. That always, for me, on any show is clear. Top of priority list. And then the other thing too would just be rehearse. Playing sports growing up, your coach always says, what you do in what you do in practice, you do in a game. And so multiple rehearsals with anything that involves audio across the board, just to make sure that, nothing jumps out at you when you go live. So that's always my approach to any show, but certainly the big game for sure.
Yeah, if any F-bombs get out, that's the end of the days when it comes to the Super Bowl. But Paul, we're closing out here, but I want to ask you, look, it's got to be great to be back directing games on a regular basis after the NHL bubble last year. So, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, how is the Hurricane season going? What are the big changes for you this year, in the truck? Obviously, there's a different workflow than in the past as a result of the pandemic. And have you been able to overcome some of those challenges?
It's been a season like no other, for sure. We got a little taste of how this was going to go last year in the NHL bubble. However, the difference between those shows and these shows is that last year, NBC in the United States and Sportsnet in Canada, they really did deliver true host feeds to the regional broadcasters. And it's not like that this year. Say like last night, the Carolina Hurricanes played in Chicago, and we were taking our feeds from the NBC Sports Chicago show, who are there doing an NBC Sports Chicago show for Chicago fans, 100% entirely based on Blackhawks. So that puts, we only have 4 sources that we can take from Chicago. One of them is a switchable router, which you can control many options in, but really you only have 4 items that you can control your show with. I mentioned the word control, and that's the biggest change, is that, in this industry, your best chance for success is directly proportionate to how much you control. And in these shows, we control almost nothing. And so it's easy for the show to get sideways and off the rails in a hurry. And we've seen that a number of times. So the shows aren't nearly, as high end as they would be from a production standpoint. They're certainly not as team friendly as they would be if we were doing them ourselves. And the technical glitches that come up every show, it's going to be a learning process until they hand out the Stanley Cup for sure. My wish is that this is the only season we do it like this, and that next year we're back on the road, with everybody safe, everybody healthy, and everybody has their own truck.
Now, Paul, we appreciate you joining us during this very busy time of the year. Obviously, not only is hockey back, but the schedule is a bit condensed and it's a little bit funky this year, but we're very happy to have you on the show, you back in the director's chair, and we really appreciate you joining us in the program today to talk a little bit about how someone like you watches the Super Bowl. And of course, anyone in the audience, if you have not listened to the podcast Inside the Truck, we certainly encourage you to do so. It's regular listening for me. It's a lot of fun. Paul and you guys do a great job with it. And really appreciate you joining us and being a part of this day. And try your best to enjoy the Super Bowl on Sunday and not to annoy everyone that's in the room.
I will. Thank you guys so much. It was a pleasure. Hopefully we can do this again on this podcast or maybe perhaps Inside the Truck. So thank you again for having me, Brandon. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Ken, we appreciate what he was able to do for us. Certainly check out his coverage of CBS's coverage of the Super Bowl. And Jason, Christian, thanks so much for being here, man. We always appreciate you guys being a part of this.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Paul.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. That'll do it for this edition of the SVG podcast. As always, we ask you to please rate, review, and subscribe to the show on your podcast platform of choice. We'll be back next week with some of Christian's interviews with some of the NBA teams and how they're producing in-venue video content in this very unique NBA season. So stick around. We're going to get some conversations with the folks at the Miami Heat and the Golden State Warriors, who are doing some very unique things to engage their fans who can't currently be in the stadium for NBA games right now. And check out Christian's On the Hardwood series now over at sportsvideo.org, which talks to many of those teams who are taking on this whole new year in a very unique way. But as for now, that'll do it for this episode of the SVG podcast. We look forward to speaking with you next time. Please take care.